One of the reasons that computers are so useful is that they can repeat an operation multiple times very quickly. That removes the need for a human to perform a repetitive task. Python provides several ways to repeat a block of code, things like for loops, while loops, and list comprehensions and generator expressions. In the next few videos, we'll look at for loops, we'll cover while loops after that, but we'll be leaving list comprehensions and generator expressions for a later section. We've actually seen a for loop in earlier examples. Now it's time to look at them in more detail and explain what was happening in that code. A for loop works by iterating over some set of values. It assigns each of the values one by one to one or more variables. It then executes a block of code once for each value. The set of values comes from a sequence or some other iterable object. We've seen one sequence type, the string type. I'll use that for our first examples. An iterable type is anything that can be iterated over. So that means a sequence is also an iterable. In simple terms, if you can use it with a for loop, then it's iterable. And I'll be introducing one iterable type, the range, in some of the following examples. Right, so back to IntelliJ, and what we're going to do here is create a new file, and we'll call this forloops.py. Alright, so we'll use the parrot string from an earlier video. So parrot is equal to Norwegian blue. So we saw how to use in to check if any particular letter is in the sequence. In also has another use when used with a for loop. So let's see how that works. So we're going to type for character in parrot colon print parentheses character. So a for loop starts with the keyword for. Next we provide the names of one or more variables. We'll stick to using a single variable at first because using more than one won't make much sense just yet. In this example, we've called the variable character. You can call the variable anything you want within the rules for variable names, of course. Variable names can't start with a digit, for example. Next, we have the keyword in. Our variable character will be bound to each of the items in the sequence in turn. Finally, we specify what the values are in. We're using the parrot variable here, but we could use any iterable object. What should happen is that the variable character gets each of the characters in the string. On line 4, we're printing out the value of character, so let's run the program and see if it does what we expect it to do. And that looks right. So if I scroll the output there, you can see each letter of the string is output on a separate line. And I'm just going to increase this just so we can see a bit more of it. Can't quite see it all without actually scrolling all the source code off the screen, but that's enough of it anyway. So that output's probably not very useful, but it does demonstrate what our for loop is actually doing. Students often find this confusing, especially if they've never programmed before. Even students who've used other languages can be a bit confused because the for loop in Python behaves differently to C or Java. So let's set a breakpoint on line 3 and run the program in the debugger to see what's happening. So you can see now that I've chosen debug for loops, the debugger stopped on line 3 where we set the breakpoint. In the variables pane, we can see the value of parrot. It's bound to the string Norwegian blue. If we use step over, you can see having done that, the variables pane is now showing the value of character. It's been given the first character in Norwegian blue, so it's bound to the capital letter N. When we step over again, execution has gone back to line 3, as you can see there, and the print on line 4 has been executed. If I switch to the console pane, you can see we've got the first letter there, N. Alright, so if I step over again now, we can see that line 3 is executed again. Now we haven't yet printed again, so there's no change to the console pane, but if I switch back to the debugger pane now, you can see that character now has the value O, the next character from Norwegian blue. So a for loop executes all the code in its code block repeatedly. It loops around until there's no more values, in other words. We're ready to execute the print line again, so I'm going to step over. And I won't keep switching between the debugger and console panes, that'll just get confusing. But if you do, you'll see that the letter O has now been printed. And we're now back on line 3. Step over again, which I did to execute the line once more, and now a character has the value R. So each time we get back to line 3 and execute it, character gets the next letter from the parrot string. And that's why I called the variable character, by the way. It's been assigned each of the characters in the string, one after the other. There's nothing special about that name, it just reflects the values that our code will assign to it. Alright, so I'm going to continue stepping over the code and you'll see each letter being assigned to our character variable each time around the loop. And you can see finally now we've hit the last letter E. And if we step over once more now executed the print, if we have a look on the console, we can see we've got the entire line now Norwegian blue. And back to the debugger. One more time I'll press step over. This time you can see what's happened. It's caused the for loop to terminate because there's nothing left for it to do. And again, you just saw that when I tapped over to the console pane, all letters had been printed out. Alright, so I'll stop the video here, run the code a few more times in the debugger to make sure you understand what's happening here. When you're happy with this basic for loop, I'll see you in the next video.